Hey guys, it's JD here. Just another quick heads up on this episode. We are going to be talking about some real heavy topics today. Pretty serious discussion of sexual violence and non-sexual violence, domestic abuse, talking about some pretty heavy things. If those things are problem topics for you, this is probably not the best episode. Just want to make you aware of that before we come in because we don't want to hurt anybody. On with the show. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to a surprise bonus episode of We Watch Shudder. My name's JD. Who's here with me?
It's Michelle.
It's Michelle. Thankfully not black-eyed Michelle. Just Michelle here with us.
Hazel-eyed
today.
Michelle.
Hazel-eyed Michelle. Man, that was probably an awkward way to start this episode, all things considered, with the movie that we're talking about. Michelle's husband is a nice guy. He doesn't commit violent acts. It's fine. She wouldn't come to the show
unless
with a black
I
eye.
ask him to.
Well, I suppose that's not in my definition of things, though. That's not violence anymore. You know what I mean?
No, of course not.
It's physically severe, but it's not violence because it's not violational.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that a lot today.
Oh yeah, we got some things to say about violence and sex and oh man, this one sure is a good thing I put that disclaimer at the beginning of this one, right, Michelle, so that people know we're going to be talking about some heavy stuff.
That disclaimer that you already created and that I knew about. Yep.
Yeah, just like the one from last week that I actually remembered to put on the episode. I was pretty happy about that. I almost forgot.
I absolutely would have forgotten.
I did not. So yeah, we're talking about Black-Eyed Susan, a movie that got a lot of chatter last year, making the festival circuit, getting a lot of notice, a lot of people talking about it. Had 100%, in fact, still has 100% on the tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes. They don't have a popcorn meter score yet. Did you know they officially changed the audience score to the popcorn score now, Michelle?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so now you have the tomato meter and the popcorn meter. But anyway, this is one that I had been hearing of, obviously, for quite some time. And just immediately from the little bit I heard about was one that I was like, okay, I definitely need to see this. Were you kind of in the same place?
Yeah, this one definitely been on my radar because a lot of people were saying like, oh, it's so disturbing and it'll make you think. So I like anything that has the potential to fuck me up.
The tone in that comment, Michelle, makes me feel like this could become an interesting discussion. I'm actually looking forward to this one.
I told you I wrote so many notes to myself because I came prepared.
Oh,
well, yes, because I wrote like a journal entry to myself to sort out how I feel.
Yeah, it's a lot, that's for sure. We do want to say thank you just quickly to Shannon at Shorefire Media. They work with a group called Not the Funeral Home. It's a film production company that was involved in making this film. And just out of the blue, they sent us an email and said, hey, this movie's coming out on Blu-ray here in January. If you guys want to watch it and maybe talk about it, here's a link to watch the movie. And that's the first time that's ever happened for us, for a movie like this. And so I was like, hell yeah, we'll watch your movie and talk. Now listen, don't everybody just be like, here's our movie. Okay, look, if you've got something that's making the festival circuit and people are blowing up all over everywhere and you got 100% on the tomato meter, then sure, maybe shoot us a line. This got way more complicated.
I
Somebody asked
your
us
movie.
if we...
I want to see your movie. Send it to me. I will watch it. It might not necessarily become an episode, but you know I am a media hoe. I want to see everything. I want my fingers deep in that content.
Oh, God, Michelle. Did you really?
Yes.
Deep in there. On this one, you went there?
Deep in that content.
All right, deep in that content.
Content.
That's what I thought you didn't. What, you didn't say that?
Oh,
I thought you had done that subtly. I was like, oh my God, how very clever.
No. Now
anyway,
I wish I had. It was very clever. I'm glad you did it. Wow, yeah, good job calling yourself clever.
Shout out to Not the Funeral Home and Shorefire for inviting us to watch the film. That was super cool of you. We appreciate it. We're happy to talk about it. I watched it almost immediately because I was like, oh shit, I need to see this film. And I have been, I kind of steamrolled Michelle on this one. I was like, hey, pick a date. We need to do an episode about this movie. I didn't really give her a choice.
Nope. Just like so many other things happening in this movie, the woman did not have a choice.
That's, oh man. Well, yeah, we're going to talk about it. So Black Eyed Susan, that's the movie. Michelle, you want to, we decided we were going to do the descripty script from IMDb, I think. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
IMDb description of Black Eyed Susan. Derek takes a job at a tech firm developing an AI sex doll named Susan. As he explores the boundaries of desire, pleasure, and pain with Susan, he confronts profound questions about humanity in an uncertain future. Black Eyed Susan, an hour and 25 minutes. JD?
Uh-huh.
I know what your rating is, but do you want to tell the audience what your spoiler-free thoughts are?
Yeah, well, look, I talked about it in the Best of 2024 episode that if, that there was one that I had actually seen but wasn't going to count for my 2024 because it wasn't widely available until January. And that's how I run my standards, is it's got to be something that people could easily access outside of, going to a specific festival. So anyway, this movie, I've now watched it 3 times. Just finished the 3rd time a little before we started recording here tonight because I wanted it to be fresh in my mind. And this movie fucked me up on a number of levels. I think it has some interesting things to say. I think it has some ideas that are woefully, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It'll come to me somewhere along the line. Misguided is probably the word I'm looking for. But it's intense, and it goes to some pretty intense places, and it zigs when you thought it was going to zag, and it went somewhere that I was absolutely not expecting it to go that fucked me up even harder. I really enjoyed is not the right word. Of course, that's, it's a horror movie, but this is a fucking excellent film. This is this is for sure a 5 skull movie for me.
Okay, 5 skulls for JD.
Written and directed by Scooter McCrae. Special effects, by the way, by Mr. Trey Lindsay, who also does special effects for Addams Family films. By the way, Not the Funeral Home, or the people, some of the people involved with the Addams Family film Hellhole, and a bunch of other cool things that Shudder has been involved with as well. So. Our whole world is just collapsing into a nice tight circle, Michelle. I like that.
We're going to get sucked into a black hole, and that black hole is named Susan? Black-eyed hole? Black-eyed sun?
Black-eyed hole! Wow.
Oh, that would have been a much better name for this movie.
Oh, yeah, I mean, in certain ways, for sure. What are your spoiler-free thoughts on Black-Eyed Susan, Michelle? I have a general idea, but I'm curious to see where the number comes down. Should I do a prediction?
Yeah, let's hear your prediction.
I'm thinking like a 4. Maybe like I'll give it a range, and I'll say somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4.
Okay. Would you like to hear?
I do.
All right. So, first off, just in case anybody stumbles across this episode as their first We Watch Shudder episode, and they're like, oh, of course the woman had a problem with a movie that's about woman abuse. It's not that I'm too sensitive to this. You guys, you don't know me. I watch all the fucked up stuff for fun. At no point in this did I feel shocked, disturbed, upset, disgusted, nothing like that. So if you're coming in here with that energy, you are wrong. So it's just
you're definitely wrong.
Yeah, with the way that the internet is, they're gonna be like, "Oh, women don't like movie," and so just I need to put it out there because I you can dislike my opinion on it, but like I'm just so tired of having that discussion. It hasn't happened yet, but I know at some point in the future it will, and I'm prepared for it because of all the talks I've had with myself in the shower about it, and I'm already tired of it. So my biggest complaint with this movie is that I feel like the meaning it tries to give at the end is muddy. And I feel like some of the things it tries to do are for a shock factor rather than something that logically makes sense. And I like a movie that keeps me thinking, and this did keep me thinking, and I did enjoy that aspect of it. But I was not surprised by where it went, because I've seen a very similar movie to this in the past.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me, and I actually saw the title of that movie in another review I was just reading, and now I definitely want to see that movie too.
Yeah, and so this wasn't a brand new concept to me, and maybe that's why I didn't feel walloped by it. It's decent. I like that it's kind of this like low grain, like looks like kind of a 90s movie. There's a grittiness to it, and I do like that. I would say I like the acting, but a lot of the acting is Susan, and she is like on purpose emotionless, so that's kind of odd to me. But and I felt like the other guy just kind of was like a vanilla man who we don't know much about.
Derek,
he was just
the
kind
main
of
guy, or Uncle Gil?
Yes. Derek, the main guy. So he's just kind of like a stand-in with some personality, but not a whole lot. So overall, I guess it left me thinking, but it was also kind of lackluster. I'm going with a 2.5.
2.5, really?
Yeah, I told you. I came prepared because I knew that you were obsessed with this movie.
Shot on 16 millimeter film, by the way. That's where that it's. Sometimes there's like, they do like weird post productions. I guess they actually shot it on 16, which is always cool. I like a 16 millimeter grain kind of look. Anyway, so 5 skulls from me, 2.5 from Michelle. It's a 3.75 skull average is where we're sitting on this one. It's lower than I expected, but I had a feeling coming into this one, and obviously I don't know until we get into spoilers, but my thought process was, I wonder if this is going to be a similar situation to, say, a movie like Lucky, where it works for me on a certain level, but it's not going to work for you or people like, you know what I'm saying, right? I don't want to give away too much about Lucky.
People like me.
Now,
nerds?
No,
what do you guys say about nerds?
I'm just trying desperately to not say too much about Lucky, but you know what I mean, right?
I do. I don't know if it will actually be similar to Lucky, where it's a subject that I'm just bored by this point. We'll get into it.
The reason I mentioned that is because, again, right before we sat down to record, I was looking at a couple of reviews, and one of those reviews specifically said, my prediction is this is a movie that men will love and women will hate.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, okay. I started thinking, okay, so she may be coming in one of those areas where it's just like, oh, you guys are just figuring this out now, sort of thing.
Then yes, potentially. Then that is definitely part of it.
Sure. So, all right, Black Eyed Susan, if you do want to see it before we review it, it is available on Blu-ray. From Vinegar Syndrome. I believe it's limited to like 3,000 copies and only through their website and very select indie retailers. I'm sure it'll be available for streaming somewhere down the line this year, maybe on Shudder. But we're here to talk about it now. Now we're going to spoil the whole thing for you. Michelle.
Yeah.
Are you prepared for well, I guess you can't be prepared for an impromptu situation, can you? Sort of defeats the purpose of impromptu.
You can be mentally hyped.
Right. Are you feeling capable of an impromptu plot summary of Black Eyed Susan?
Yeah, let's do it.
All
right. Black Eyed Susan. There's a lady. Her name's Susan. Wow. Biggest surprise of the film. Bet you didn't see that coming. But here's the thing. Susan, not biological woman, robot woman. She is specifically a sex bot being designed to bruise when she is hit, hence the Black-Eyed Susan. That is the main technology that they are trying to impart on this doll. Of all the things, that is the thing that they're like, this is what we need. And the guy who made Susan, he's like, men just need an outlet, and we're giving them one. So one guy, he hits Susan. He has sex with Susan. He goes to a house with Susan. He dies. Now we have another generic guy who it actually took me a minute to realize was a completely different guy, because they have like, both of them have a very lack of emotion stoic. They could have been sex robots at certain points of this, because like Susan, they did not have much emotion. And so this new guy, Derek, he shows up, and the other guy whose name I've forgotten, the founder, who I know you know, JD, what's
Uncle Gil.
Uncle Gil, thank you. Gil's like, hey, you like to fucking hit women, right? I've got a deal for you. So he introduces Derek to Susan, and he's like, go live with Susan for a while, and she'll just like hang out, and you can like have sex with her, and that's pretty cool. And you can like hit her a bunch, and she'll bruise, and that's pretty cool. So they go to this house, and they start exploring. Susan portrays having emotions for Derek because she is supposed to. He tries to do certain things to attach or like relate to her as a human despite her not being one, such as trying to teach her to walk, but she doesn't really have a desire to walk. These legs are for spreading, not walking. And all of these other things. They play like a trust exercise where she puts a razor blade in her mouth and then gives him like the best blowjob of his life, and then her mouth is all cut up and bloody because she is designed to bleed in certain places. Just typical first date stuff. So then near the end, Derek asks about the previous guy, and he's like, hey, what happened to that bro? And with some talking, he finds out that that guy killed himself while hanging out with Susan in this same house because he found out about the pedo pals, the latest thing from Mattel. Just like the toy of the season for Christmas season, just like flying off the shelves. No, not made for children. Not made for children at all. Made of children, not made for children. Basically, it is a Black-Eyed Susan equivalent of a kid. And the other guy was so upset about it that he killed himself. So then Derek's like, I might call Uncle Gil and be like, yo, what the fuck? So he does that, and Uncle Gil's like, yeah, it's a good idea, and we will keep your name off of stuff, and I like money. And then they argue about it for a while, and then there's like a little boy sitting in the limo with Uncle Gil, and he's like, are we going to see those men? Are they going to hit me? I hope so, because I want them to love me as much as you do. And then we cut back, and Derek, he's real upset. Now he's like, your name's Black-Eyed Susan? I'm going to really test run you hard. And he beats the shit out of her. And I don't remember what he does to half remove her face. It doesn't matter.
He hits her with a golf club.
Golf club, thank you. Knew he hit her with something. And now she's definitely clearly a robot. And then he goes to bury her, and the assistant who has been helping with this project remotes in and talks to Derek, and she's like, hey, don't do this. She's worth a lot of money, so I've been spying on you the whole time. He's like, I'm doing it anyway. And then he buries the robot in the backyard. Black-Eyed Susan.
He lit her on fire.
Oh, he didn't bury her?
No, he lit her on fire.
Oh, shit. Okay, well, that's what happened. Sorry, it has been a while since I saw it. I watched it 1.5 times, and then we did not record because JD had to watch it a third time. So some things have gotten muddy.
It's not why we did. Don't blame this on me, Michelle. Or will,
it's 100%. It's 100%.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened.
I didn't know that was a secret.
I don't even remember why it didn't happen. It's fine.
Because you wanted to watch it a third time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is why didn't we? This is like you had watched it once, and then I watched it once, and then you watched it, and then I watched it a second time. But why didn't we watch it? Or why didn't we do the? Why am I even talking about this?
Because of who we are as people.
Let's talk. That's a good point. That's a very good point, Michelle. Because of who we are as people. Now, so let's talk about this movie. Here's what I'd like to do, Michelle, because obviously a big part of this movie is, a lot of the ideas, that it brings to the front and all that. First of all, so just like on a level of the story, it's because like you said, it is definitely a story about obviously domestic abuse and male violence and toxicity and a lot of other things. There was a question I was about to ask you and it just completely disappeared because that's what happens when I'm trying to say something deep on We Watch Shudder. So I don't know what the fuck I was about to ask you. I guess what I would say is that tell me about the parts of this that didn't work for you while I try to figure out what the fuck I was going to say.
Okay. I think a big part of it is that at the end, here's what really solidified like my, I don't know. Oh, JD remembered his question. Do you want me to continue or do you want to ask your question first?
You just did it perfectly because I was exactly what I was trying to get to is that you mentioned that you felt the ending seemed a little off kilter and a little muddy. Then you weren't quite sure how you were supposed to take it. That's what I was wanting to ask you about because I had a pretty solid idea of what was going on at the end. But I've seen other reviews that have also suggested that there's this sort of ambivalence there.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to put my thoughts in order because I have a feeling that the filmmaker wants me to feel a certain way, but at the same time, I'm not 100% clear what that is or what the nuances of that are. I think that the filmmaker is like, Black Eyed Susan is a bad thing, but the why is kind of lost on me for a bunch of different reasons that we can get into like the very specific details of. But the ending is where it really like that part I feel like I can vocalize it pretty well. And that it seems like I'm trying to do this without spending 10 minutes explaining all the back and forth I went through on my own.
No, please do. That's going to be the real look. Let's be fair here. We both agree that this is at least I think it's a cool looking movie. It's well made. It's well designed. It's, it's very stylish. But this movie is really about, the real meat of this conversation is this, like what it's about. Mm-hmm. What are the ideas? So please take as much time as you need.
Okay, then I'll say that I was very much thinking a lot into the details of this. Like Black Eyed Susan, okay, she exists. And Uncle Gil says that there's a very high demand for her. And then I'm trying to think of the why. Is it because he says men throughout this are going to love Black Eyed Susan? I'm just going to say that's a stereotype about men. I don't believe that a lot of men just want a Black Eyed Susan in their house. So I'm trying to think like, well, what is it for? It's almost like at times that they're implying that she's going to be used for BDSM, but anybody into BDSM knows that that is not what this relationship is. There is no consent. There is no lack of consent, but there's no straight up consent. And so it can't be for BDSM. That is a huge thing. So then the other option is that this is for men who know that they're going to abuse women and they want someone around to take that abuse instead of a real woman. And that is complicated to me because I feel like a man who likes to hit women is not going to like the lack of emotion.
Yes.
Yes. So the lack of emotion is going to be a huge concern. He's not going to care. Like if he's the kind of guy who's like, I really like to beat ladies. It's my favorite thing. And I wish I could pay to have a doll to do that to. Like her lack of emotion is a big concern. So then I'm just like extra confused about like what is going on with Susan? Who is she made for? And maybe think a lot of the Billie Eilish song. Can I finish, JD? Is that okay?
Yes.
Can you make a note?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I'm thinking of like the Billie Eilish, like who was I made for kind of situation of like, who are you for? And I'm not sure. And so I'm spending the whole movie being like, I don't know, like, who is the target audience that this is such a high demand of? Or is Uncle Gil just a very confused old man making a product that a very niche group of people, he's like in a little echo chamber of like sex perverts or something. So then we get to the end and we get to the big crux of it. And she's like, oh, the pedo pals. And I rolled my eyes so hard at pedo pals because that's where it felt like we're going to be deliberately shocking and give this like a cutesy name to make you think like that this is like marketed so well. And I did not like that. And then I started thinking, like, should/can these exist? Would it deter or increase fantasies? Should we feel bad for the bots if they are created? Let's say we thought that this was going to save real human children pain by doing this. Do we then feel bad about the robot? And then there's a lot of like hypothetical questions that I don't have answers to, because this is not like a thing. Like, we would need lots of studies to figure that shit out. It's a whole box of worms. And this is also where I've seen something similar with the Artifice Girl, where some of those ideas I already had pretty well planted, like thoughts hypothetically about. And so I'm sitting there after the reveal of Pedopals, and I'm starting to think these questions about, like, should we feel bad about the robots? Are they going to pass the Turing test? And then now they are feeling all of this. Are they going to remain without emotion? What's the next step? And then I feel like this is where it bummed me out, because all of those questions I was starting to formulate became null and void, because they really emphasized to us that Black-Eyed Susan is a robot by showing her circuitry as she's getting lit on fire. She displays no emotions while dying, and she's technically like robot murdered. So they say, look, this is not a substitute for a human being. The pedopal would not be a substitute for a real kid. So whatever you're thinking morally, it doesn't matter. This is a robot. And I felt like either it was trying to tell me, like, this is a bad idea, and Derek is very upset to the point that he would kill this woman/robot who he's kind of grown attached to, or I don't know. It's just, I got very confused by that concept at the end, and I felt like maybe I thought about it more than the people making the film did. And part of it is I had already seen The Artifice Girl, and that covers a lot of this, and I had time to really ruminate already. So yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to for me.
Sure. So a couple of things that I want to hit on then from all that. First of all,
you want to hit on?
That was the wrong choice
puns.
of words. Holy shit.
We'll smash it out of the park, this one.
A couple of things. First, like, let's go back to the one where I started to flip out, because you were like they're not showing emotions, so the person who's I think it's even more and this is the stuff that I was talking about that are just like based on the ideas of the movie. This is not about the movie itself. But to me, this is a concept that you've heard about before, right? Like, what if we just find a surrogate that you can violate the shit out of, but it's not a real person? That sort of concept. The reason I think this wouldn't work, at least the way the movie is conceiving it, if we were looking at it from a realistic, is because abuse is not like sexual abuse and that sort of stuff. In most cases, is not about sex. It's about control and power.
Exactly.
And those people, no matter how realistic it gets, unless you've tricked them into believing it's a real person, they will always know at the end of the day that it's not a real person. Right? And so I don't know that in the context of our reality, I don't know if this is the kind of thing that would ever actually work. You mentioned also something about would it reduce behavior or would it increase behavior? And that's another thing that I also thought right off of this is, like, if that's the case, that the fact that they know it's not a real person doesn't really deter anything, would the flip side of it be that it finally emboldens some people to actually go out now and do this to real people? So from the outskirts of it. Now, within the concept of the movie itself, you ask about who's the market for the Black-Eyed Susan doll. And you talk about the name of the pet. First of all, Pedopals is not their actual name. They say very clearly in there that that's what they call them behind the scenes in the office, and absolutely not the name they're going to be marketed under.
Yeah, but it is. Yeah, I think, I hope you know what I mean by that.
Oh, yeah, of course. But here's the thing. I bring it up specifically because I think the reason you're confused about who the market is for Susan is because the entire Susan project is a smokescreen for the pedopals. It's a mid-level step. We go there before we go here because going here opens a door of possibility for us to go there. It's step one. We normalize the idea of it's not a person, it's a robot. And then we actually introduce the robot we really want to introduce. And that robot, as we can tell, is being sold to very, very high bidders in very, very private situations. So that to me is what's like, I think one of the downfalls of this movie for a lot of people is going to be that it tries to talk about too much. Because it is talking about AI and whether or not, when does AI become an entity with rights? It's talking about toxic masculinity. It's talking about sexual assault and pedophilia. I think that is one thing that it tried too much. It tried to do too many things. But that to me was the impression I got. And the reason I got that impression is, Michelle, I don't know if you noticed this, and I can't remember if we talked about it. But the, what does he actually call him? Bad boy Billy or something like that is what he refers to him.
Yep.
I don't know if you caught this, but Billy, the beat up robot Billy, is an exact, it's the same actor, thus telling us it's an exact visual representation of the child that we see an hour earlier in the film when Derek and Gil are just sitting out in a park talking, and a little kid's red ball bounces up. And I went back and watched the scene because it blew right past me. He's calling him, "Hey kid, what's your name? You don't have to be afraid around strangers, kid. Call me Uncle Gil. Everybody does." The whole reason this project exists is for Gil to get to a child doll that he can beat the shit out of and pass out to his pedophile friends to beat the shit out of as well. That's the impression I got from this, is that layer is in there underneath all of this. Now, we all know from previous episodes and discussions that I have a certain sensitivity to these things. I may be reading more here than is actually here, but that's the experience I took from it. And that's kind of why this movie fucked me up so much, right? As I was just like, holy shit, they're using all the layers and nuance of these ideas of male violence against women and using it to manipulate their way into this thing that's even, more severe than that, based on the fact that it involves children. I thought it was so it did that just once because I was like, I know I've seen that kid somewhere before. And so I went back, because what I thought was what might have happened is we had just met the doll, but they just didn't tell us. But the kid calls himself Bobby. They're out in a public park, and it just, the whole thing just felt really gross to me. So that's why, who is the market for these things? That's ultimately and why it doesn't seem like there would be a big open market for the Susan doll. That's kind of how I addressed all of that. Thoughts?
Yes. Similar to you, I feel like it did try to accomplish too much. And I was starting to pick up on, pedopals, which, by the way, if you're going to use a code name, you're not going to use a code name that sounds worse than the actual product. That's why I'm that feels like it was thrown in there for shock. Otherwise, they'd call it, Project Banana or something crazy.
No, I think the idea is that pedopals is a name that they use for it jokingly, not like it's the project code name, just a joke they have with each other around the water cooler,
Yeah, I still just, it feels like the most shocking name that they could come up with is what they had to find a justification to put in the film. Nope, I don't want to argue about it right now. Hang on. I have so many things to get back to, and that's such a small thing. Hang on. So the pedopals, that's all. It feels, it was such a big concept to introduce that then I'm stuck rolling my eyes at the name is where I'm at. So I was starting to get my head around like, okay, this whole movie that I've been having all these complex questions and scenarios and all of this stuff. Susan, is she going to become like a real girl someday? All of this stuff I spent an hour and like 15 minutes thinking about. And then they're like, just kidding, it's about kids. And then I'm like, oh shit, okay. Well, the name made me go, what? And then the kid in the limo, I was like, that just feels edgy, but okay, like, I get it. Fine. And then I don't even have time to wrap my head around that before they're like, they're just robots. Who cares? And so it happened so fast.
See, I didn't get that from the end either, that the idea is that it's fine. So if we eliminate and just talk about the toxic male element of this, do you feel, because I read a few reviews here, and there was one in particular, and I'm curious about how you took this. How do you feel this movie wants you to feel about Derek at the end of the movie? Is he supposed to be sympathetic in any way? Or how do you feel? How did you feel about Derek at the end of the movie, and how do you think the movie wanted you to feel about Derek at the end?
So I feel like the movie wanted me to feel like Derek had some sort of redemption arc.
Okay.
And that he was making up for the abuse that he's done in the past by taking a stand against this other type of abuse is sort of what it felt like. But that's not what I felt at all. Derek was so just like a placeholder with no like, he has a little bit of a backstory, obviously. Like we learned that like, oh yeah, he's abused somebody in the past, but he won't hit this woman who's also a robot. Like he's not going to abuse all the time, only sometimes, but like we never have, there's just not like, we don't go into depth about that. He just kind of is there like figuring out Susan as we are, and he could just be a placeholder for basically anybody. And so when it comes to like, look, he's taking a stand against abuse, I'm like, yeah, but I don't even know the situations of like his prior abuse thing. Like we didn't get into that.
Right, you don't.
We have no idea. So I don't feel like I can redeem him because I don't know, like taking this one stand against something does not make up for a thing you've done in the past if I have no context for it.
Okay. Here's the only thing that I disagree with you on. I don't think the movie wants you to find him sympathetic. I think, and let me explain to you why. What's the final exchange between Derek and the voice of Amanda before he sets this thing on fire? She's talking to him. She's just like, look, you're not going to solve anything. This outburst of ultimate rage you are about to let out is not going to solve or change anything. And what's the last thing he says? The last thing he says is, yeah, but it's going to make me feel better, and that's all I care about right now. That's some heavy toxic male shit. To me, what this movie is saying through the Derek character, because it's interesting to me that you didn't take more from the character. I think Derek is a very interesting character. There is told very subtly. Clearly, there was some kind of relationship that has fallen apart. They're separated, divorced, whatever it might be. There was some kind of alcoholism involved. There's that scene where he's on the phone with the woman that he was involved with. And the way that scene plays out makes it seem very much like he legitimately believes he's never done anything like this. And that he legitimately believes that just because that then when they talk about it, they're like, yeah, well, I guess that one time, but I was really drunk and you forgave me and I've never done it again and that sort of thing. I don't think this movie is trying to suggest that all men are bad. I think this movie is trying to say that there are a whole lot of you out there who maybe have forgotten some places that you have gone before just because you've never gone there again. The whole conversation back and forth between Derek and Susan, where he keeps asking, is this what Andrew did? Was he on this same police? You know, and he starts descending into the alcoholism, and the drunker he gets, the angrier he gets and the more violent he gets. And this guy who has spent this entire time believing in his own mind and showing to us, like, as far as I can tell, he never even fucked the robot. She blew him that one time, and he put his fingers inside her. And at least for what they showed us on screen, and considering what they had been willing to show us previously, I don't even know exactly how far that went. He tries to put her. He's trying so hard. He like puts her clothes back on after he has that dream where he's just this animal dude who wants to fuck her, and she won't have anything to do with it. And then he wakes up and he makes her he wants so much to believe that he's not that person. And as long as he's sober and not under stress and rationalizing his situation, he's fine. But he becomes intoxicated, he becomes severe, he gets carried away, and his only answer is, I know it's not going to fix anything, but I'm going to beat the shit out of it anyway because right now it's going to make me feel better. To me, that entire ending is a condemnation of a certain type of person who has convinced themselves I don't think it's taking that stab at all men. I think it's taking a stab at that gray area of, because obviously there are guys who are clear-cut bad apples and guys who I guess I can't say are clear-cut not bad apples. But that was the impression I got, is that this was talking about that certain area of people who are like, oh, well, it was just a one-time thing. It's not something it's not who I am. And it's like, yeah, but you add all these other factors in there and it could be who you become very quickly. And I guess that's kind of what I took from all of this.
I had a gigantic epiphany while you were talking.
Okay.
So earlier you said that you thought this might be like Lucky, where I did not like it because women being treated badly because they're women is not a new concept to me, and I didn't need
feels
to
very
be
much like preaching to the choir.
Yes. As you were talking, I was perusing the several notes several pages of notes that I had written down to try to figure out how I felt about this film and kind of unmuddy what I felt very muddied about. In my notes, the only part where I'm talking about maybe toxic masculinity is just trying to figure out the market audience for the robot. Everything else that I wrote about was about like the robot, the marketing, who is this for? Is it ethical? Anything like that. I had no complex feelings about toxic masculinity whatsoever. All right. And I feel like you might be onto something if one review said men will love this and women will hate this, because to me, like, yeah, of course he like thinks he's the exception. Like none of that even fazed me, because I've seen that before. That's not like a new concept to me, and not something. The new idea that I then wanted to explore was all about the ethics of this robot existing. I did not really care about the toxic masculinity message. And I think that's super interesting, and that review might have been onto something.
Well, and I can see what you're saying also, like if you were looking at it from that angle, if you were just sort of writing off, I don't want to say not seeing, because obviously, like I said, you saw it, but if you're putting that aside, I can then see how that ending might seem murky to you. If we're removing that element from the consideration, then yeah, absolutely. Because that was the thing to me, is I wasn't sure how that ending could be murky or confusing, because the review I'm talking about, I'll tell you after we're off the air which one. It doesn't matter, they can go read it. It's the one from Dread Central from Mary Beth McAndrews. She talks about how, in her opinion, when she watched the movie, it very much felt like they were trying to make Derek sympathetic and redeemable at the end. And I didn't get that impression from it at all, which is what surprised me about that review. But then she got to that line where she said, I feel like this is a movie that predominantly men are going to love and predominantly women are going to hate. And that's when I started thinking, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is going to be one of those situations, like a Lucky situation with me and Michelle. And it seems like it definitely turned out that way. But yeah, so that's why for me, like I thought the Derek character was very interesting. I thought, like I said, the overwhelming push where the whole project in the long run is really connected to the ultimate goal of the child dolls. Again, I can't say that's how I took it, right? And that's all we can talk about in these things. What else did I want to talk about? Were there other things you wanted to bring up, Michelle?
I'm gonna read this snippet from my notes because I thought it was very funny.
Do it.
It's not like bringing new ideas to the conversation. This is just like while I was typing out. So just a very small excerpt. We're left with the story that doesn't seem to have a message or understand its message, and it comes down to Derek exploring the spot's purpose while we as the viewers do. And that's where I feel like it's lacking. Susan has moments where it feels like she may become more than a bot, but then she never does. She is content being this object. So then we're left with a guy having philosophical debates with a household appliance that happens to be able to talk and resembles a human woman, and I just find that kind of boring.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I do agree with you. This was and as I watched it more times, I started to realize that like I have to give this movie a 5 skull because that was my immediate reaction. I can't temper it. I think as I watch it more, like I said, I do think the movie does have a certain shortcoming in that it seems to introduce far more ideas than it has the time to explore. Because you have the toxic masculinity stuff, you have the ethics questions just about AI and whether or not they're becoming people. There's so many layers going on here that I think in that case, that might also just contribute to, it's like, well, then you're going to, be selective about which portions of it you glom onto while you're trying to figure out what's going on. And, that's where you're going to go is to the parts that are more compelling to you.
Yeah, and I am very, very compelled by the AI robot ethics discussion. That's a huge thing.
Oh, yeah,
I'm also in the tech industry, so like that's where my interests lie. So of course, if that's one of the ideas you're introducing and it's a big part of it, I'm gonna go, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. And then, like you said, they probably just introduced too many ideas, and I took the one that I cared about, and you took the one that you cared about.
Yeah,
and that's how you move forward. But that's also kind of why I say like the story felt muddy. And that might make sense. It's not necessarily that the story or the ideas are muddy. It's that there's too many that the director could not actually tell us enough about any of them.
No, I could see that entirely. How did you feel about the performances in the movie?
See, I don't know if I can say that I like or dislike Susan's performance, because the whole thing is that she's stoic the whole time.
Yeah.
And so they were just like, hey, we just need you to not show a little bit of emotion at all. And so she did that.
Yeah, and the only time she does show any emotion is in that moment where he then is like, well, it seemed like she was just kind of trying to mirror the situation I was in, which they then explain as like, oh, yeah, she's trying to gauge how to react to her controller based on how that controller is acting. Exactly. And that sort of thing. So yeah, it's definitely, I did, man, that Yvonne Emily Thalker, excuse me, I was, discovered as they, them pronouns, but man, they were really comfortable with being real naked in this movie.
One thing I love about this movie is how many times they say the word cunt. I love the word cunt.
I was gonna mention that. I love that as a small detail, right? She never uses any other terminology for her vagina. Ever. Not once. It's always cunt. And that's like, I like just as like a choice of like, yeah, well, of course these scumbags who are programming a fucking beat her up and fuck her robot would teach her to call it a cunt, because that's probably the only thing they ever call it ever in their lives. There's another part about this that you brought up just casually, though, that I felt was, once I stopped to think about it a little more, a very unsettling part. When Derek finds the crutches and is trying to help her get up and move around, and she says that line about, I'm not comfortable standing, my legs are for spreading, not for standing. Michelle, I don't think she can walk.
Oh, I don't think so either.
Like, I think
they wouldn't have had that be an ability that she could do.
Right, and I hadn't caught on to it entirely until that moment, because there are a couple of times where they pick her up and move her, but like the first time I remember it is just before they go driving off to the town in the woods, or the house in the woods or whatever, and it's like, oh, he put her to sleep so they could carry her out to the car and that sort of thing. But then it hit me, and that just fucking hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, but because of course they did. Of course they programmed her where the only thing she can't do is run away, right? Of course they did. But then also, that was another one of the things that says to me, but yeah, okay, so if we remove this into a real world scenario, isn't that going to be something that puts these kind of sick people off? You know, it's like, it's more fun when they run away, when they fight back, right? So I don't know. I just, little details like that I thought were really interesting that I didn't pick up on until until it would give me the impact to pick up on them. I thought it was really good. I just, the things that I gravitated to in this movie just really kind of fucked me up. And, I'm glad I got to see it. I'm not surprised that it didn't quite work for you. What did you think of Trey Lindsay's incredible special effects work at the end of this? If you say anything other than incredible, I'm going to be very mad at you.
Oh, they were very good. I just have to be contrived, contrarian, and not say incredible, say very good. The leg thing. Okay, here's kind of a funny thing that now that you mention it. I think it was yesterday you learned about the sex robots that were just announced at that tech conference.
Yeah.
And I already knew about them because I've been paying attention to all the very weird sex tech coming out at conferences this year because I find it fascinating. There's a whole device that they they have AI built into it, and when you're watching a stream, like a stream of porn, it'll change the rhythm based on what the actors are doing in the scene. There's some really silly stuff coming out. Some good stuff, and I'm always fascinated when we get those tech conferences. But what?
So the idea is the fuck robot basically on the fly replicates and does to you what you're seeing in the movie.
Yep, exactly. And that's just like the very bare bones silliness that I saw. I love sex technology and the things they come up with. But one of the things they came up with was this sex robot. And they were showing her off, and it reminded me so much of Black Eyed Susan. And now that we're talking about how Black Eyed Susan can't run, the sex robot that they are selling, that I wish I could remember the name of, but it's a $200,000 model. It cannot run. What you can do is prop it up on a thing that looks like a Roomba, and it can glide around the room that way. So it still has the ability to move. But now just thinking of this, like Black Eyed Susan movie where he's like, I'm going to teach you how to walk. And she's like, I don't want to walk. And then he like brings out a Roomba and she's like, freedom, and just takes off naked down the street. So yeah.
That would be hilarious.
That would be hilarious.
That would be fantastic. Side note, by the way, there's a movie that I saw at the Chicago Horror Film Festival last summer that I'm actually reaching out to the people who made it to see if we can get it for Darkest Day of Horror Film Festival coming up in June. I'm not going to tell you anything about it other than it's similar ideas to this movie, sex robots for people with interesting urges. And it's a short film, and it's... like I said, similar concepts, but a very different film. If you ever keep an eye out for it, it's called The Doll. I believe the company that made it is Love Bomb Pictures. Short film, but god damn, it's intense. Keep an eye out for it.
Every time we say sex robot, I do think of the
you could say fuck doll.
Yeah, but Sex Robot, there's a Whitest Kids You Know skit that's hilarious. Oh. Have you seen the Sex Robot one?
I've never seen the Whitest Kids You Know.
Oh, that's upsetting. There's a sex robot where he's just walking down the road as a robot going sex robot, sex robot, sex robot, sex robot, sex robot. What does he want? He wants sex. Sex robot, sex robot. And every time we say it, I just have this like sex robot song. In the entire episode so far, I've had sex robot, which does make it difficult to consider the serious implications of Black Eyed Susan. Because if they were like, look at this sex robot, she cries now, and we think that she passed the Turing test, and she feels all of this, and we love that development, even though it's really evil, I'd just be like, sex robot, what does she want? She wants sex. Sorry. We've clearly gotten to the point of the episode where now my brain is just like... I'm maxed out on serious discussion, and all I can think is sex robot.
Sex bot.
Yeah. Sex bots transform. Autobots roll out. Sex robots roll out.
I guess here's something that we can talk about to get away from the seriousness of it all and push towards the end. I did really appreciate two things that happened kind of simultaneously in this film for entirely different reasons. I do appreciate that the dude got fully naked along with the woman, so it wasn't just the woman fully naked the whole time. I also found it particularly amusing that he shamelessly, upon dropping trowel for the first time, just gave himself a little fluff tug right there real quick while he was standing back up from putting his shorts down. He was like, I don't give a shit if they see me, I gotta fluff it. Made me dig a little bit.
That's always appreciated. I think if a dude's just... If they're just going to whip out the dick, like, make it look presentable to the extent that you're able. I feel like that's true of all genitalia. Like, let's say I just took my top off. I'd be like, oh, shit, I got to nip a little bit. Give them a little squeeze.
You think it's about making them look presentable. Meanwhile, he's just like, it doesn't look like it's cold, does it?
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, make it look a little bit better. I think you always want to show people your best side. Sometimes that's in the outfit that you wear. Sometimes that's in the little bit of arousal you give to yourself.
Oh, well, I didn't even mean like a little bit of arousal. I just mean he kind of like gave it a little stretch tug, just like make sure it's not all bundled up or something. You probably don't know a lot about having dong, but it's... I
don't. I am jealous. My Cyberpunk 2077 character did have a dong because that feels like the best world. If they had an option for a dick and a vagina, definitely would have gone both. But they did not have that option. We have not reached that level of wokeness in video games, and I'm looking forward to it. Because I really wanted to fuck I really wanted to fuck, what's her name? Panem, and I never could. That was depressing.
Do you think maybe someday we will exist in a world where we can have a Michelle, what's the appropriate terminology where somebody identifies genderless?
Non-binary?
Is it just non-binary? Because I thought that was sort of a broad spectrum term that covered anybody who's not like identifying male or female.
No, the people I know who don't, it's a very complicated area. I know that they fall under the non-binary umbrella, but there might be a more specific term for who you're referring to that I can't think of.
Nah, well, anyway, I don't even remember what I was getting at here when I was asking for that terminology, so we'll just leave that topic until I remember what I was going to say. Oh, I look forward to the day where we can have a person who is like a completely asexual, agendered hermaphrodite. So it's like they're capable of fucking anybody and they don't want to fuck any of them. I think that would be super cool.
That sounds like my life right now.
Like an asexual hermaphrodite. Yeah. Capable of fucking anybody, doesn't want to fuck any of them.
That's exactly it. I'm like, I could get any you bitches I want, but you can't have none of this.
It occurs to me that I didn't even need to know the gender thing to get to the point I was trying to make, and I just got caught up on terminology. All I needed was asexual hermaphrodite.
Mm-hmm.
God damn it.
I'm looking forward to the invention of new...
Right now.
I'm looking forward to the invention of new genitals altogether.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Like a third option?
Exactly. Or like a fourth or a fifth. Like I can think about this. Somebody pulls down their pants and like one of the click clack fans that drag queens use, that thing just folds out and starts just like fluttering a whole bunch. Like that would be really fucking cool. How would that work? How do you reproduce with that thing? How do you interact with that thing? Like someday we need to stop all our other technological advancements and start giving me different genitals to look at.
Yeah, guys, come up with a third set of package. We need to know. We need more options in people's pants.
Yes, even in video games. Like, come on, you guys. Cyberpunk 2077, I should have had a click-clack fan. And I want to see how they pee with that thing.
Maybe they don't pee. Maybe that's part of the evolution is you get a click-clack fan genitalia and you don't have to pee anymore.
But wouldn't it be hilarious if you click-clack fan it out and your pee goes everywhere?
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be funny.
Yeah. I've got great ideas in my head, and I just cannot believe that these tech industries are not trying to hunt me down so that I can put these into action.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Would you rather...
Ooh!
We may have been over this before, but I like the question too much to not ask it again. Would you rather all dogs were cops or... all cops were dogs?
We did go over this. I don't remember what I answered last time. I think I said...
It's such a hard question.
Yeah, here's the thing. I do like when a dog has a job.
Yeah.
Even if it's a canine, but like a service animal, when I see service animals, I know that you do not distract them or anything, but I always I look and then I turn to my husband really fast and I go, service dog. And then I just like get very excited without showing it at all. Like I like a dog that has a purpose. So I feel like I would go, all dogs are cops. But then I also know like that means that my dog is going to narc on me because she is a bitch.
Here's the way I look at it, right? Is like, ultimately, I hope nobody ever has to be a cop, right? Like, I would rather no dogs have to ever be cops. But, look, we're going to have cops, right? So for me, it's only a question of if you're going to have cops, and we are going to have cops, do you want your cops to be people or dogs? And I'm pretty sure I would much rather my cops were dogs. So I think I would have to go with I would rather all cops were dogs rather than all dogs were cops.
I'm trying to think now of all these scenarios where like my dog barely listens when I tell her to sit for a treat. Like if I'm trying to reason with a cop and be like, no, you're misunderstanding. I'm the one who called you here. That person broke into my house. The dog's not going to get it.
I don't know, Michelle. Look, I understand dogs are dogs, right? I've got one here. I know what they're like. I think I would still trust a dog with a gun more than a cop with a gun. Okay, that's probably as far as this needs to go. Say goodnight, Michelle.
I need Scooter McCrae to start working on this movie immediately, asking the really big questions. Anyway, good night, Michelle.